This is the King's Gambit opening. Starting with e4, you play e5, and your opponent, who's feeling romantic that day and sad, is deciding to take one of the oldest chess opening possible, f4, introducing the King's Gambit, expecting you to take on f4 because he has so many traps prepared, so many tactical patterns to crush you. But we have a little surprise for him, because today I'm gonna teach you the Falkbeer Counter-Gambit that is playing the move d5, countering in the center. If your opponent decides to take, you already have queen check. If he moves the king, as you can see, this is a blunder. You're gonna go like this: check, king moves, check with the bishop, king moves, check, king moves, check, checkmate. This is already a checkmate in 8 moves. So let's see what happens if, after taking on e5, what happens? You give a check. The normal move is to play g3. Even Magnus actually played this. He went check, attacking the king, attacking also the rook. It's called a fork. The queen comes, you take the rook, and now queen f2. And you may think that the player with white just blundered the rook and he's totally losing, but it's not as simple as you think. Even Magnus played this with white and he crushed someone who was 3000 on chess.com. But let me show you the right moves here that black didn't play against Magnus. He should have played check, the knight covers, and take the pawn. He attacks the queen, propose an exchange, because you're up in material, you want to exchange queens, right? And if he plays a move like this, you develop a knight. Very simple chess. He attacks the queen again, it does not matter. Come on d7. He develops, pin the knight. He develops his bishop because he wants to long castle. Take, take, you short castle, he long castle. Look at this position. I don't know about you, but I prefer to be black in this position. I think this position is totally winning for black, and this is how you should consider playing against this kind of variations. So it went e4, e5, f4, and d5. The most played move here is when your opponent decides to actually take on d5. What is the reason why we played this move? Sacrifice this pawn. Like Reti used to say, you're only sacrificing a pawn here, so your opponent, who prepared all these variations after the move e take f4, is just out of book if he doesn't know the Falkbeer Counter-Gambit. Here, I want you to push in the center. Most people play knight c3. Very simply, you're gonna defend the pawn on e4. Now, there are 2 ways to play. Either they play queen e2 or they push on d3. Let me show you what happens already if they go queen e2. Now, I want you to simply develop your bishop on e7 so that you can castle as quickly as possible. He's gonna take the pawn on e4. You don't exchange knights here, just castle, because there is a trick. Because after d3, you take the pawn in the center, but most people here will make the mistake to say, now this pawn is attacked, this is mine, and I'm gonna protect it, and then gonna go with c4. And here, this opening with black is so vicious that it's already winning for black. Because look what happens. I take on e4, and when you take, I give you a check. What it does is that it opens up actually the e file, which means if you try to cover like this, you lose the queen. You lose the queen. So this is the thing. When I give you this check, you are forced to move the king away from this file, otherwise I pin you. But this is not finished. Now I attack the queen move. Now very simple, give a check. The king goes to c2, develop the knight, threatening to go on b4. It's very direct move, very vicious. If he plays a3, now give another check, and look what is happening. You gave pawns, but look at all your pieces. Look at the pieces of your opponent here. This is a disaster for white, and you have no idea how they're gonna lose here. If they play like this, if they go with bishop d3, you simply take, the queen takes, and now knight c5. The queen comes back, obviously, and now you play the most beautiful move of all, and you play queen f6. Your opponent here will think that you blundered. He will think in his head, what is this guy doing, blocking his bishop, because I just played g3 and this bishop is gone, because he cannot retreat. But you know what? Who cares about this bishop? I don't. What I'm gonna do here is bring the last piece that wasn't playing, give him the bishop. When he takes, now give a check. When he covers, there is a brilliant, absolutely brilliant move here that wins on the spot with black on move 18. We sacrificed that rook. And now you're thinking, you're putting a rook, literally, can be eaten by this, can be eaten by this. If the bishop takes, thank you very much, checkmate, bye-bye. That's already a checkmate. What if rook takes? That's a mate in 7 moves. You go rook takes, the king is forced to actually go, otherwise you would just checkmate him here, for instance, but it's not gonna save him. We still take on d3. The king is forced to go here, now you give a check here, the king is supposed to come back, and now simply knight a4, and he's gonna come here. You're gonna be checkmating like this with a knight. Okay, so you saw how vicious this opening is. If they just defend, a pawn in the center, you castle. If they defend like this, they're gone, because knight takes, queen takes, bishop check, introducing this threat. Try to remember this. I have another one now. The other move I said, instead of playing this move to put pressure on this, was to just play d3 and thinking, okay, if you take, I develop my bishop, then my knight will go out and I castle. This is in a perfect world, because you know the guy is playing the King's Gambit with white, he's a romantic. So here, develop your bishop, pin this knight. That's the first move. If he tries to unpin himself, sacrifice the pawn. It's a deviation, because when he takes, now you can take this knight, because the knight on c3 is pinned. If he comes back, I want you to take this knight. It's a very good piece that he had. And now there is a trick. Some people think they're smarter than others, and they decide to give a check instead of capturing the bishop, thinking to bother you with your king that is in the center, and then they would take your bishop. Here, if they play a move like this, on move 9, they lose a piece on the spot. Hard to see for some reason. You just move the king here. They can't take back the piece anymore, because this rook would come here, pinning the queen to the king, and they lose a piece this way. Just after this move. If you don't know this move, it's hard to find it in a blitz game, right? If they play normal chess and they take back, look at this position that you have with black. You're a pawn down. I get it. Your structure is amazing. You do not have any weakness in your position. You have an advance in development. You are ready to castle, for instance, on this move. Like the next move, you're gonna castle. Would you rather have black or white here? And there is one thing that is important. The King's Indian player is out of book here. He's not gonna play the best moves. And this is something that you have to do in your games. Try to put your friends out of book as soon as you can. Because if you're playing against someone who spent 15 hours studying an opening and you didn't, you're toast. And you're not even playing your friend, you're playing a book. This is the issue. I want to show you another variations that people can play, but I would say e take d5 is 90% of the games. I want you to know what happens after a move like d4, because some people would try to counter in the center. This is like an ego thing. You try to counter gambit me, so I'm gonna do the same thing and I'm gonna copy your move, for instance. Right? Here I want you to take on d4. When he takes, play knight f6. And here there is a trap as well. It's super vicious. Some people would decide to actually just push the pawn, attacking the knight. Go here. Now they want to try and exchange this knight, and also putting pressure actually on this pawn. But this is a big mistake. Again, just develop your piece, bishop c5. If he takes this pawn, it's finished. Over. The queen is gone. Again, it's super hard to see, because after this check, you do not have a square with your king. You either go here or you go here, these two squares. But on these two squares, when I take the knight, that is the only piece defending the queen, I would take this knight with check. And this queen is gone. Look what happens. Check, you take, and I take the queen and I win this way. So if your opponent is greedy, like most people, they're gonna end up losing this way. Here, instead of knight c3, they should have played the move that is bishop e3, but it's not as simple. You play bishop c5, they go check. Again here, there is a nice trick. Bishop d7 and they go queen b3. If they go queen b3, I want you to go queen e7. Do not defend this. Most of the time in your games, do not defend this pawn. Develop your pieces instead. Let him grab material. Checkmate him. Way better. So go queen e7, because if he takes, that's a disaster. You take the bishop. He takes the rook. You go check. It's game over. Knight c3. If he goes knight c3 here, you go knight takes knight. And he cannot even take, because you take with the queen. King e2, queen d2, king f3, checkmate. Again, I don't know how many checkmates I need to show you to convince you to play this counter gambit against the King's Indian. I hope the King's Indian is not gonna bother you after this. He doesn't need to play knight c3, he could go with c3 for instance, but you saw, I'm sure, the winning move is queen take b2. And look at this ridiculous queen here. She's not doing anything, she's lost, there is absolutely nothing to save this position. If they develop the knight, for instance, there's checkmate in two moves. You go check, and then there is a checkmate with the bishop. If your opponent doesn't know this opening, there are so many traps that he's gonna fall into. Because when you play this move, when he takes on d4 and you play knight f6, he shouldn't push the pawn, he has to take. This is the way he should play here. You have different ways to play, but I recommend you play c6. And your opponent against c6 is supposed to play a move like knight c3 to try and develop his pieces, but a lot of people actually make the mistake here to just give the check. You go bishop e7, that's a massive mistake, and you know why, because you're just developing your pieces, and he's not, he's taking material. You take back, the queen moves again. I don't know how many queen moves this guy played. Don't do this, please, in the opening. And castle. You finished almost your development. You just need to develop this and this. And this guy thinks we're not gonna win when he only put his queen out. That's all he did. It's not gonna happen this way. Already this position basically is very hard because you're threatening, for instance, bishop b4. And if he covers, you go with rook e8 with a nice pin. So this position, I can tell you, or just trust me, is extremely hard to play. If he goes, for instance, with bishop d3, you go rook e8. You have to move this king. There is no way around it, because I'm gonna move this bishop somewhere and you lose this queen. So you have to play like moves like king f1, and then you can never castle. Now you go bishop b4, attacking, and it's done. It's totally over, this position. Because if the guy moves, you infiltrate actually with the rook here, and he's losing a piece. So that's the thing. I'm showing you how often white could blunder in this position. Obviously, they could play now some more quiet stuff. I would say just developing his piece. Here you can take on e4, and now they take on e5. At least white, if they decide to kind of give up, you know, they could play like something like knight f3 if they don't want to win the psychological fight, I would say. And then you can just take on e4, they take on e5. I recommend you play a move like knight d7, challenging this one straight away. Most people would play queen e2 here, thinking if you take, they will take on e4. So you take, so most people will play queen e2 here. Just take in the center. And when they take, play queen d4, defending your pawn. Now this guy is gonna try to attack it again. Take the pawn on e5. He takes, exchange queens, and look at this position. The position is equal in material. Now in this one, when the guy plays knight f3, you do not have a pawn down. Look at this. I would rather have black in this position. The structure is extremely healthy. I'm not saying white structure is not good, but I prefer this kind of structure with black. Just go with bishop f5. The guy is gonna go like this. You have to be careful. You cannot move actually the knight, otherwise the pawn on c2 is lost. So he could go d3 in this position, and now you should just long castle. If this is really what can happen to you when you play the Falkbeer Counter-Gambit. By the way, tell me if the pronunciation is good. I have no idea. But yeah, this is another way that they can do. They can play knight f3, for instance. Okay, I'm not gonna try to give you more variations because there is no way that already you remember all of them. So you're gonna have to go through the video again, I think. Just go and try this counter gambit at the table and see how it goes. And please, stop playing into people's hand, playing this move. They just know everything by heart, so just don't bother. Don't bother. Counter gambit, that's what we do. This move from today. I'll see you on the next video.